right, welcome everyone to episode 2 of the Geospatial Index. We've got an old friend of mine, actually, Chris Brown from Mango Maps. So that's what I knew you for originally, Chris.
Yeah.
But this is all about a new venture. So welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself. Then we can get on with the questions.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Chris. So as what Will knows me from, and maybe some of you watching will know me from, is I was the founder of Mango Map. So Mango Map is a web mapping platform. We started it in 2013, so it's probably 9 years ago now. It spun out of projects. I was working in Cambodia at the time, and I was doing a lot of web mapping for development aid. And back in those days, whenever you wanted to take some GIS outputs and publish them online, there weren't any kind of point and click products out there to do that at the time. So what you often had to do is you had to put a GIS guy together with a web developer, and then you would use open source libraries, map server and those type of things to put something online, and you would host it yourself. Every time, I knew nothing about GIS when I started coming into those projects. I was the web guy, and one of my co-founders was the GIS guy. And we did lots of projects like this where we implemented these web mapping solutions for everybody from like UNICEF, World Bank, these types of people. And then every time I implemented a project, I tried to automate as much of the code as I could so I could reuse it on the next project. So we would increase our efficiency next time around. So that was probably back in, I don't know, like 2005 to 2010, we were doing that. And then about 2010, we sort of got to the point where a lot of the open source libraries that we were using under the hood started reaching a stage of maturity where we thought, oh, hang on, we might be able to automate the entire process here. So end users can just, upload a shapefile. Shapefile was king in those days. Upload a shapefile, style their own map, and then publish it themselves. And then you don't need the web developer in the mix anymore. So we started building out that product, and that evolved to become Mango Map. So Mango Map, since then, it's been used to publish over 100,000 maps. We've got customers in, I think over 100 countries. So yeah, it's kind of it's out of startup mode. It still feels like a startup. We're still a small company with a small team, but yeah, it's been going a long time, and it's been used to do a lot of things.
Yeah, I think would have been 2012. I think that it was my first encounter with Mango Maps, or what would soon become that. And I think it was the Phnom Penh mapping meetup where you gave a presentation about how to make a map in 10 minutes. And I think you chose the risk of another sort of catastrophic earthquake in California and the consequences in terms of nuclear power plants. So it made a big impression for me. It was a memorable way to introduce the platform.
Yeah, actually, I still remember that map and that presentation, because I think that was around the time of the Fukushima earthquake and tsunami in Japan, and the reactor there with the problems. And then I just thought it would be an interesting map to look where the seismic hazard zones are around the world and their proximity to nuclear power reactors. And the place that stuck out like a sore thumb was California. Major fault lines, and then there were 2 very large nuclear facilities right there. So I thought I'd map that out. And like I was saying, the place that we come from previously, where we used to implement web maps as consultancy projects, I've worked on projects where going from like the idea to having maps online would span months. I've even been on ones where it took years, like a year to get a full web mapping portal online. So at that presentation, our tagline for Mango in the early days was the 10-minute map. It was the idea that if you had this data set, you could go from that to a published map online within 10 minutes. And then I did that as a lightning talk at the presentation, where I got that data and started with nothing, put it online. That stuff today, now we're in the world of like ArcGIS Online and Carto, and there's all these products out there. It seems like, oh yeah, okay. But in 2012, that was novel, and it was revolutionary, because that was the time that these products were all coming online. It wasn't only us that had spotted that the underlying technology, the speed of web browsers, some of the innovations that had happened around Google Maps. There was kind of what would you call it? A series of events that all came together that made this kind of thing possible. So there was a load of startups that all started around the same time. Mango was a bootstrap company. So I've always been a bit, as you can imagine, someone who's living in Cambodia in their 20s, always been a bit alternative. I think you can join me with this. You're a bit alternative
absolutely.
yourself.
Yeah, there's a whole community.
Yeah, places like that tend to attract a certain type of people. So in those days, I was very big on the whole. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jason Fried and his book Upwork. Have you ever?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't know much about it. I also want to say, just quickly to interrupt you, just for the benefit of everyone,
Yeah.
can you define bootstrapping?
Yeah. So bootstrapping is the idea that instead of taking like VC money and investment, you use your own money in order to pay for the development of the product. So this was the name's been around for a long time, but there was a big movement in the sort of 2000s behind this guy Jason Fried and another guy who made the Ruby on Rails framework, and they had a company called Basecamp. And the idea was that you don't take VC money in and millions of dollars and you have all these staff. The idea is you have a small, highly skilled team. You grow as your revenue permits it. You aim for profitability as quickly as possible. And then you build a company where you're building product that you enjoy working on for a smaller group of customers. You don't need to get to a $1 billion valuation that all these VC. The thing with the VC model is it's death or glory. That's it.
Right.
It's like you have to raise a round, and then you have to say how you're going to spend that money, and you spend it. In 18 months, you raise another round, and it's basically death or glory. You know, if you get to the end of it, all of a sudden, wow, you're a Mapbox or somebody with hundreds of millions valuation. But for every Mapbox, there were 20 others that death was the outcome rather than the glory. So the bootstrap model is like a hard grind. It's a hard grind. So in the beginning, you don't have any revenue when you start a product like that. So you're having to plug those holes with consultancy work. That's what we were doing. We were implementing projects, doing consultancy work, and then using that money to build out Mango. And then we're slowly getting that, with software as a service, you have that monthly recurring revenue. So it's very different to a traditional retail business where every month, effectively, you're reset to zero again and you have to make your money again. With a software as a service, people sign up, and we actually have very, very good retention rates, averages in the years. So you win them, and then slowly over time, your monthly reoccurring revenue goes up. So you can think here's the line here that's your costs, and here's the line that's your revenue. And at some point, those two lines intersect. And after that point, you reach a point of relative safety. So although it's a real grind in the beginning, I think you can reach that point of safety more quickly. Somebody who's VC funded, they very rarely meet that point of safety inside of 5 years. I read something recently that is often closer to 10. And that's if you make it. And for every one that makes it, remember, there's like at least 10 that fail. So that's the route we went with Mango. It hasn't turned into like a company that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but we made it where others failed. And I'm sort of proud of that, because also we did it in, I'm not sure what you'd say, but in a tough environment. We were in Cambodia. We didn't have access to top tier developers. Cash flow issues, all of it. We had a lot of headwinds, and we still managed to make.
But that there's also, that's actually an inspiring aspect of the story, I feel, because there's the empowerment of those local developers. They might not have been top tier, but it shows that the education system in Cambodia was adequate to provide you with not only willing but also capable workers that did produce a product now that you said has resulted in customers in more than 100 countries. So that says something actually about what the country is capable of.
Okay. To speak on that point, what I meant by that is, when I say top tier, what I mean is developers that are ready to go on day one. So for example, we're doing something that's very niche. Like for us, it's something we work in all the time. But for anybody else, they've never heard of GIS, they've never heard of mapping, they've never heard of half these libraries, GDAO, any of that. Okay, so you're not going to find a developer in Cambodia. You'll find a developer today who's very good at JavaScript and React and mobile development. Or back then when we started Mango, they'd know Ruby or Java or C, but they didn't know those libraries. So whenever you hired anyone, you would always have this lead time of 6 to 12 months for them to get up to speed. Not on learning how to code, they've got that. Cambodia's got great software developers, but learning, this whole mapping world, that was the tough bit. When you've got a bigger pool of resources like you'd have here in the UK or the US, those developers would be more expensive, but it's possible to hire people that are ready on day one. They know those libraries. You can just bring them in, off you go. Now, in 2022, we're living in a much smaller world. We're in the world of Zoom where, today we're actually in the same time zone in the same country talking. There's been many times where that's not been the case. It could have been the other side of the world. I was just talking with Paul yesterday, who both of us know.
This is
He's
your
in
GIS
Melbourne.
partner
Yeah.
in Cambodia. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking live. So now in 2022, the world's a much smaller place, and we can hire resources from much further afield. That remote working is much easier. It was possible before, but it's easy now. Yeah. So that was one of the barriers there. The plus side with Cambodia is obviously developers are cheaper. The costs are lower. We pay like what are considered like really awesome wages in Cambodia, but it's still much lower than what the salaries would be here in Bristol. But the salaries
let alone here in London.
Yeah. But the salaries we provide to our developers in Cambodia afford them a much higher quality of life than what the average developer salary affords you in London. Okay, so it may sound low to us.
No,
like,
and I love that.
But my guys, they all own their own houses, and they're
fantastic. No, and that's also a really positive part of the story. So yeah, I really like that. Okay, so I think I've fashioned a segue then into what was supposed to be the first question.
All right.
So you mentioned bootstrapping. Basically, the concept is that as early as possible, you are deriving a revenue stream to get to the point where you can support the business. You mentioned subscribers, and I guess over the long term, businesses like yours, in a funny way, can come to support themselves. And by a funny way, I mean that Mango Maps, as I understand it, somehow cornered the gym franchise map niche. Can you tell us a bit more about that? I would never have thought that Mango Maps and gyms could be connected.
Yeah, okay, so that's a weird one. And we're sort of leading towards something here, just to give some sort of background. I think what we're leading towards now is MapStack, which is the new startup that I'm working on right now. Because the guys who are watching this might not know that. And
yes.
Will's very carefully
with us.
leading us through the story into so you can understand the later.
We will get there.
You'll get there. Okay, so yeah, so at Mango, just to give some backstory, we've there's a category of customer at Mango or user that we've seen since pretty much day one that have become known internally as the unmapped. Okay, and who the unmapped are. So actually, before we even get into who the unmapped are, let me tell you what we saw and how we discovered them. So in the early days of Mango, when we first launched, we would see a lot of people sign up. So we're a software as a service product. You know how they work. You go to a homepage. Here's the promise of what we do. You click on a button for a 30-day free trial. People go into the trial, they'll sort of upload some data, make a map, and then at the end of the month, some of them will pay, some of them won't, some of them will never see them again, some of them will come back in a few months and pay them. But we had this cohort that would sign up every single month, and they represented about 75% of the signups who would sign up, go to the homepage, go to the sign up page, sign up, and then never do anything. They wouldn't upload a data set, they wouldn't contact support, just nothing. We just sign up and do nothing. And this was kind of a mystery to us. Now, when the product was new, it was obviously very kind of beta, I think would be the right word. So in our head, we're like, oh, we're missing features. The onboarding's not good. We don't have the right data formats. It was all like product related. But as time went by, we were thinking we're sort of plugging those holes one by one, and it was still happening. So we're like, this is kind of strange. So I did what I should have done in the beginning, is I started reaching out to these people that had done it and said, listen, I saw you sign up. You did absolutely nothing. I'd love to know how you obviously got a problem you like to solve, and I'd like to know if I can help you solve that problem. And then obviously some people wouldn't reply, but the ones that did, we kept hearing the same story again and again. And the story went something like this. It was I had this idea for a map that I wanted to make for my university project, my small business, my NGO, my community. I had this idea of what I wanted to make. It's not the kind of thing you could do in Google Maps. They don't know the word GIS or they don't like that. There's something that I want to show on top of the map. That was the idea. I couldn't find anything that did it. I couldn't do it in Google Maps. I did a Google search. Your product, because if you type into Google like just web GIS or online GIS, we're in the mix in the first few results there. So we came to your product. I saw it. Oh, you can make maps. The maps that were in the screenshots that I saw looked like the kind of things that I was thinking about. I'd sign up, and then as soon as I signed up, it's asking me for these funny file formats that I've never even heard of. I didn't know what they were. I didn't have that data. Maybe my data was in a spreadsheet or a CSV, or I didn't even have the data yet. And then I look, and then some of them that are really perseverant. So most people just stop there. They're like, "This is not for me. Go." And then you've got the really perseverant ones who are like, oh, I realized that there's this type of data, and I went looking around for that type of data and I couldn't find it, or I found the wrong one. And when I got it, I didn't know how to open it. I found it on a government website. I didn't know how to open it. And then the super, like the 1% who was super perseverant, going, oh, I realized to open that, I need this piece of software called a GIS. And I saw this, something called Esri, and it costs a lot of money, and I couldn't figure it out. And then the 0.1% are like, oh, I found this open source one called QGIS, and I opened it up, and there's 500 buttons and 600 menus, and it was too much, and I just gave up. So that's the story. 90% of them just give up straight away. This is not for me. So we started calling these users the unmapped, and we couldn't really help them. So the next part, we started tagging them in our you have these CRMs, customer relationship management systems, where we tag them. Oh, let's not spam them with emails and all it, because our emails are all geared up to people who know what a shapefile is, would be the easiest description. If you know what a shapefile is, you can use Mango. You don't need to be a GIS pro. You don't need to be an expert, but you at least need to know what.
But then there's the shapefiles of the world. They're not shapefiles. They're they are shapefiles. Plural is the thing that's the issue with them. It's not just one file, and that right there is the source of the problem.
I always use shapefile just as the example. I don't like shapefiles. I'm a GeoJSON guy, but being a software developer. But yeah, so those guys would do that. So we were like, okay, right. So here's the problem. We understand the problem a bit now. These guys, most of the time, don't have data, or if they do have data, it's not prepared. It's not in a spatial format. So they need to learn how to do a join. So they need to go and find a piece of data that has the boundaries for whatever they have in that spreadsheet or their idea, and then they need to figure out how to join those two things together.
Hang on, are you saying that gym owners knew about shapefiles and were able to do joins?
We'll get there. The
mystery deepens.
We'll get there to these guys. Okay, we'll get to the gym owners in a moment and why they're interesting. But what would happen with these guys? So we decided to start making videos and tutorials, and we even made an ebook to try and take this unmapped group from zero, having no mapping skills, to having the very basic skills that they would need to find like the boundary file for US counties, open it in QGIS, and you do a join, export it, upload it into Mango. Okay, we spent a lot of time making resources trying to teach the unmapped how to do that, and it didn't work. Only about 10% of that group would be successful with that. And the main reason that they weren't successful is not because that process is too difficult. Are you familiar with a concept called the awareness hierarchy?
No, haven't heard of it.
There's something they call the awareness hierarchy when it comes to new technology and technology products. So, and there's 5 steps. Step number 1 is the person is unaware. They're unaware of anything. Step number 2 is they're problem aware. That means they understand they have a problem. I want to see this thing on a map. Step number 3 is solution aware. They're aware that there's a type of product that has the solution to this type of problem. Okay, and then they get what they call product aware, which means they also know about your product and your name. And then the last step is fully aware. They're using your product and they know how to use it. Most of the people in this unmapped category are somewhere between unaware and problem aware. And what you find is people that are in that category, their ROI maths is really low. They're not even sure if this is a real problem yet. They're still feeling their way around the edges. They're not like, if you're a consultant and you've just been handed $100,000 job to go and do something, you're going to go and find a solution for it. You need that. But a lot of people in the unmapped are just like, I wonder if I could do this with the map. And as soon as you put too many stumbling blocks in front of them, they just drop off. They're like, oh, it's too hard. It's not worth it. This isn't right. I give up. Yeah. So that's where we got to. So that's the unmapped. I went on too long there.
That's okay.
So let's circle back around to kind of gym owners and where that got interesting. So we've been keeping an eye on this unmapped group for a long time. We realized that there's this pent up demand there from people that would like to do something with mapping but can't. And then gym owners was something that came along. So what happened there is one of those, when you make a discovery about something, most people would say it's a eureka moment, but really it's well, that's weird. We got into it like that. It was just it's weird moment. We work quite closely with a lot of these clients, so I won't name them by name, but what basically happened is we started seeing a lot of gym franchise companies creating accounts with Mango and paying. And we hadn't had any before, and then they started, and a few started. You know, it was like a weird trend. We're like, so what's going on there? We dug in a little bit deeper, spoke with these guys, and figured out basically that a company that was very high growth in the fitness franchise industry. I won't name them, but they were very high growth, and they were kind of the poster boy for like a global rollout for fitness franchises. Were using Mango as part of their territory sales flow. So they were using it to map their territories, and they were using it to using it with customers to sell territories. And then apparently something that's very common in the whole franchise business is like a secret shopper. You know, where you would go along to franchise X and pretend to be somebody who wants to purchase a franchise to see what their whole sales and onboarding flow looks like, so you can imitate it with yours. So you can imagine why there's a strong desire to do that in franchising, because most of the people in franchising are not franchising veterans. They're veterans from, say, owning gyms or window cleaning or whatever they're trying to franchise, restaurants. They don't know about the franchise business. So they sort of discover it. It's a common thing to do. So what they were doing is these other people that were coming on were just trying to imitate the onboarding flow of this company that was a success story, and Mango was part of that. And then we slowly started working with franchise brands more closely. Now, what was interesting with these guys is the one that did it in the beginning had a GIS people and a GIS team in there. They were big enough. And they had somebody who already had that background.
How big were they? Do you know? I mean, we don't have to get the names of them. Global. Okay. So, because that's interesting only because it's good to know at what scale the geospatial industry, so-called, gets invoked. You know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so it's pretty much global.
We were with them from the beginning when they grew out of one country and spread. But they were like bringing on multiple new countries per year. They were spreading extremely quickly.
So it's at the point where they start to go multinational that, again, our discipline starts to get invoked. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting to know.
Yeah. So they were in there. They were using Mango to do it. These other guys that wanted to imitate them weren't that big. They didn't have the GIS people inside. So they fell into the classic unmapped category. They were like, oh, we've seen this cool thing. I want to do that, but I just have absolutely no idea where to start. I don't know where to source the data. I don't know how to prepare it. I don't know how to secure it, because you don't want your competitors seeing where you're selling territories and where your boundaries are and your pricing. That, that's sensitive information. So they didn't know any of that. So these other companies that were coming in, we had to hold their hands. So we have you could call it like a self-serve Mango pricing model, which is the one where if you just turn up, sign up, upload your own data and do your own thing like a GIS guy, that's one price. And then we've got what you could call the sort of premium service, the concierge service, where we offer an entire consultancy package around that, because we've worked with so many franchises now. We know the common problems. We know how to properly size territories, and we know how to prevent them making mistakes that are very common and easily preventable early on, but very difficult to fix if they go further down the line. So
is this any franchise, or because it sounds like you've found a niche, which is a concept that was sort of discussed in the last episode, and it seems like one of the primary issues you need to focus on as a business owner is defining a niche and trying to dominate it. So would you say that for geospatial or web mapping, you guys are one of the ones that dominate the niche of doing it for franchises, and any kind of franchise, or just one particular type?
Restaurant franchises have a different set of needs, because that tends to focus around a point and foot traffic, and then you're getting more into business intelligence. You're crossing over into that. The place where we dominate is places where you would have one location and it would have its territory would be a boundary. The one that's very high growth for that globally at the moment is fitness. The reason for that is basically the death of the high street. It's probably the same in Australia, and in the US, the death of the kind of strip mall, you would call it, because of the internet. Internet shopping's killed a lot of those places. What seems to have happened is it's brought commercial real estate prices down to a level that enables new business models that weren't possible before. So here in the UK, if you go to one of the, in the US, they kind of call it a strip mall or an industrial park, these kind of big semi-warehouse type units. If you went there 20 years ago, it would be, so here in the UK, it'd be like your kind of PC worlds, selling computers and PCs.
Curries,
Curries, electronic shops, big golf stores. Those things are all dead now. The internet's replaced them, but the units are still there. So now when you go to those in the UK, a lot of them will be gym franchises. There'll be a Fitness First or something like this. And also the smaller units that are on what we call the high street here, you call it Main Street in the States, these small, like, individual house type shops, they're being turned into like little yoga studios, Pilates studios, jiu-jitsu places.
Okay, and all of those have a territory of customers in a certain driving distance or walking distance that they're trying to capture against all the other franchises in the same niche. Right. Okay.
So and they're selling those. They're selling, somebody wants to buy them. So then they're mixing that with data. So, if I'm a lot of people, when they purchase a franchise, if they're an individual buyer, it might be the biggest financial decision they've made in their life. They might have to remortgage their house, quit their job. So if when they're making that purchasing decision, they could be empowered with data at the same time, they can compare the territories and offer and go, oh, this one's got a slightly higher household income, but the average age is a bit higher, and we're doing MMA, maybe your average
MMA is for the baby boomers.
Stage fighting, we need to go. Let's go down the road. Yeah, so that kind of thing, location intelligence type things. Now, so these guys fell into the unmapped, but unlike a lot of the unmapped, is they have enough budget. This problem's important enough for them that they can spend a decent amount of money on solving it, basically. So we knew this unmapped were there, but unlike the unmapped that we always saw going into Mango before, where I want to make a map of my local community, or here's this project I'm doing at uni, and I want to, those guys can't spend the self-serve Mango price, which the average is, about $200 a month is the average. Never mind the like concierge type service that we're giving to the franchises that can cost, 5 figures. They definitely can't afford that. So work with the franchises showed that you can get successful outcomes for these people if you can solve those basic problems from them. The problem of how do I source data? How do I prepare the data? How do I turn it into something useful?
And basically, I guess you saw a pool of customers amongst the unmapped that were well capitalized, that were worth building up another business for. Yeah. So, and that's something that's grown out of Mango Maps. Okay, so perhaps it's worth skipping quickly through this question before we get to MapStack itself. So I guess in standing up another business, you yourselves also have a territory that you need to make sure you can penetrate and defend. So when you were doing your due diligence before you created MapStack, were there any other geospatial competitors that also seem to have detected this unmapped opportunity? And what do you think of the competition that's trying to address the unmapped?
I'm not seeing it. I'm not.
There you go.
I'm not
so
seeing
you've
it.
just told me there's a niche. This is the star business then. And to use or is it Richard Koch's term, or 0 to 1 type thing, or blue ocean? You're saying this is a blue ocean?
I would say it's blue ocean. I would say that there's the only outfit that I've ever seen have a proper crack at this. Do you remember GeoCommons?
I do. I haven't heard of it for a while.
Yeah. So GeoCommons, I think they were like ahead of their time. So I think they had the same idea. Like, how can we make a place that could be the world, a hub for the world's open data? Because that's the biggest problem. If we separate the problem that the unmapped face into 2 parts, there's 2 parts. The very first problem they have is sourcing. A lot of location data's out there. We can find it. You and I can find it. No problem. If I go and tell you right now, go and find me the median household income for the US by zip code for Texas, and I give you an hour.
Yeah,
I could get through that. £100 right now. You'll come back with that within an hour.
Yep.
Okay. And then if I tell you, right, I want you to open up that data and bang a quantity legend on it, that'll take you like 2 minutes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's
I'd see if I can get done with Mango Maps too. There you go.
yeah, get it done with Mango Maps. Then it'll be 1 minute. All right. So that's the biggest problem out there, and this is actually a problem that's close to my heart from Cambodia. This is my that term everyone loves at the moment, lived experience. So one of the things that really annoyed me with Cambodia, I worked on a lot of projects where we would build open data portals, kind of World Bank, UN type projects, where it would be a 5-year project to big health study of Cambodia. And they go out and we collect all of this data, or other consultants on the project would. where are the health centers, what are the health outcomes, how many women are breastfeeding, how many children are meeting these health markers, you know the type of stuff that aid agencies collect. And once they had all of this data, they said, oh, we want to make all of this data available. So you'd end up building a content management system with mapping as a part of it, and you'd be able to view all this nice data. So one problem with that is every one of these projects would like repeat the same work. They would build this custom thing over and over again, and there's huge inefficiency in doing that. And then the second problem is they would self-host, because this is like a time, all those aid projects are always like time and materials type thing. This is the fixed budget. And then what would happen is at the end of 5 years, it's supposed to be handed over to the government. And then as sure as night follows day, as soon as the UN or the World Bank money stops, the lights go off, servers off, data all gets lost, and it just gets repeated again. So there's all this repeated work. And it's not only in developing countries I see that. I see it in developed countries. Like if you go through the minefield of the UK's open data system, you're like your ONS, you go in ONS and it's got these pieces of data, and then another bit's going to be on data.gov, and maybe the ONS site's got really nice maps. Their maps are really cool, but their data's a bit out of date. And then, do you know what I mean? It's difficult to navigate your way through.
Yeah, I had to do that actually for the introductory episode for the podcast, where I was getting just the growth rate of the adult population, because I wanted to get the proportion of the adult population that had an individual savings account, and I wanted to look at that over, from 2008 to now. And that, I think I went to 3 different government websites and had to put it all together for myself in a spreadsheet. Yeah, it required a bit of time. Yeah.
Do you know what it reminds me of? Like, just from a softer angle, this might not be an analogy that you're familiar with, is GitHub. Are you familiar with GitHub?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So GitHub, for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with GitHub, who's not a software background, I think everybody knows GitHub at this stage, but GitHub is basically a repository of all of the world's open source projects, and also privately it has closed source projects that are on there as well. But the starting thing, it was open source. Open source suffered from the same problem as open data historically. Before GitHub, there were all of these different places where you could put open source projects. There was kind of SourceForge, there was Google Code, there was all these different places. And then there were loads of individuals where projects would have their own website, and they would host the project on there, and you could download the source code. So it was really, really fragmented. So it's very difficult to find open source projects. They were hidden basically. And then they were the ones, if you think about the long tail, those were the big projects that were on Google Code or SourceForge. But there was this huge long tail of like hobby projects that people were doing at home that would just never be online, and nobody else would see the light of day. Yeah, it would never see the light of day. GitHub changed that. Now we have this central place where all of the
it's like the Facebook for coders.
Exactly. However big or small, are all in one place. And if you're looking for something, you know exactly where to go and look. It's active. And GitHub also does a really good job of sorting the wheat from the chaff. You can see, oh, how many people are using this project? How many people have forked it? How many people liked it? When was it last updated? So that's one thing. So you can give things a quality score effectively when you judge whether you're going to use them or not. And then also these little hobby projects gives them the light of day. So that's what I think. So I think that where open source was prior to GitHub is where like kind of open data, and especially open location data, is today. It's all over the place. It's spread around all 4 corners of the internet in every country around the world. It's hard to find, and when you do find it, it's often very difficult to assess, is this any good? Is it junk? The people that even the people that have published it, there's no feedback mechanism in play for them to even know if it is junk.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is there's a latent community, a latent global community waiting to coalesce around a central point.
I think so. There's 2 parts. One is taking existing open data and moving it into something like MapStack. So something where you can, we haven't got all the features yet, but MapStack's very beta. We only just released like beta version a few days ago. But
sorry, and it's driven by your observation that there's this massive unmet market that you've called the unmapped, simply because geospatial as an industry, its file types, let alone its methods of analysis, are incomprehensible to someone without 6 years of university study.
Exactly.
And that has to be a STEM degree.
Exactly. We both know it. It's a very enterprise heavy industry. Okay. We know We know what the projects cost. We know what people are spending. So there's a group down here that just need very, very simple things. You know, the unmapped, you know, they don't need like, you know, LiDAR and, you know, 3D. What they need often is to say, you know, which suburbs in my city have the most people between 60 and 70. And if you're lucky enough to live in somewhere like the UK, probably Australia, I know for the US, where we have pretty sophisticated government open data sites where that stuff's kind of already mapped, and it's not easy. Like, we'll always moan about them, but we have to consider ourselves quite lucky and blessed that we have these systems where you can actually find that data. But what they often need to do is, you know, especially when you're in a business use case, they have these kind of like freaky things that they want to join together that are often not in the same thing. They'll say, oh, I want to know people aged between 50 and 60, and also like they own a cat. I know that's not in the ONS data, but you know, just the silly, these silly things that where you would need to join a couple of tables together to be able to visualize what they want to see. I feel like as a community, we're quite intimidating. I find the unmapped are intimidated by us. Okay, I think it's because there's a lot of overlap with government and academia. You know, GIS that whole world loves its jargon. It loves its complexity.
Well, just look at the background that I've chosen, because I'm trying to go through the different space filling curves episode by episode. So this is the Sierpinski, I think that's how you pronounce it, curve. So immediately I've lost everybody, including most people in my
you're
in the industry. So yeah, I'm guilty.
Get some fractals next time, or some
it kind of is a fractal time. Yes.
Right. Yeah, we're nerdy. We're inaccessible. What we want to do with MapStack as well, which is going to be a bit weird, and early brushes with the GIS community, they don't like it, is we want to be quite playful. Especially in the beginning when we're starting, we're going to be quite playful. A different tone, just to make us more accessible to the unmapped community, because the GIS community takes itself very seriously. Like, you'll probably see on Twitter, we only made some maps public like a few days ago, and the first maps we've been making are ones that most GIS people would say, oh, they're stupid, they're a toy, you know, we did one about global population projection in 2100. I did a murder rate one yesterday. Great. So we're doing very, very low res, country by country data sets that any GIS person could find in 10 minutes. There's probably already other maps out there. That's what we're doing. In terms of accessibility, we're setting the bar super, super low in the beginning. We want to build a foundation there. And once we built that foundation, we want them to grow with us as we go into, like, what I use the resolution is just a paradigm analogy, but from very low res into slightly higher res stuff. We're also communicating on different channels. So, you know, Twitter, for example, tends to be more serious, more academic, especially around the GIS community. So I'll put one of those maps on Twitter, like the one yesterday. I don't think I even got a single like. Why didn't you like it, actually? Well, I bone to pick with you about that. No, didn't like the map I put out yesterday.
I feel so guilty. My God.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about that after. Anyway, but we made a video short of it. We made a video short of the same map. We dropped it on YouTube Shorts, and it got 1,800 views on there. Got a bit of chat going in the comments, 50 likes, and a load of referrals across to the map. And to be honest, the audience that we're trying to improve the world for is that audience.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the guys who look at that and go, oh, wow, that's so interesting. Oh, here's a map. I can click on it. Oh, I can do a filter and I can find where are the 5 places that will have the highest population in Europe in 2100.
Yeah.
But for the unmapped, it's the idea of, we're not going to replace GIS tooling or any of that industry. That's not it at all. What we think of ourselves to be in the future is an on-ramp to take people from 0 to 1, from doing nothing with maps and data to doing something.
Yep.
And we're not going to extend our feature set in future to start overlapping with more sophisticated tools. If people need more sophisticated tooling, once they've gone from 0 to 1 and they go, oh, this is really interesting, I wonder if I could do X, Y, and Z, we'll be like, here's a whole suite of tools. Here's QGIS, here's PostGIS, here's all of these things that you can go and learn now. Now you've seen the value. One
of the final questions, and given that this has a focus on investing and the business side, especially for common folk, to do with the geospatial industry, Mapstack, apparently we can invest in somehow through a form of investing that the UK government supports. Could you tell me in a couple of minutes about that?
Yeah, you can. We're gonna be this year. We're gonna be looking to raise a seed round. If you want to know exactly, the exact details, you have to contact me directly. No doubt, will put my contact details below. But you'll be able to invest through a scheme. There's two schemes here in the UK called SEIS and EIS. So it's Enterprise Entrepreneur Enterprise Investment Scheme. We'll have to Google it. Everyone just uses the acronym. It's one of those things. SEIS, basically there's big tax benefits. Those tax benefits mean different things to different people. It depends what your tax bracket is. But the short of it is that under the SEIS scheme, if you're a top income, you're in the top income tax bracket, you'll get basically a 50%, right? 50% of your investment will be written off again. You can write off against your income tax. Okay, so the government's kind of meeting you one for one on the investment. There's a limit on that. You'd have to do the Googling because there's different limits for different people and depending on what phase it is. But the most basic one's £100,000. So in a year, you could put in, you would only have to put in £100,000 and you would get £200,000. You get 50% of that £100,000 written off against your income tax. So you got a 50% discount. And on top of that, if there's no capital gains on any returns that you get as the result of that investment, so you get another big incentive there, because when, if this company goes big and it blows up, when you pull that money back out, no capital gains on the other side. Fact check me on all of this, because there's a lot of details and it's a government thing. There's lots of small print, but this is the like 10,000 foot explanation of it. And then also, if the company folds within the first 5 years, you get to offset 25% of your loss against your income tax. So I think, it works out to something crazy, like under the SEIS scheme, which is a smaller one, a company's only allowed to raise, I think it changed with that Liz Truss mini budget to like £250,000. That's kind of a friends and family type one, but effectively only 25% of the investment's at risk.
Is at risk, yeah.
And you're getting a big discount and you're getting the capital gains benefit on the other side.
The threshold 100,000, or because a focus of this is real regular folk who might only have, I don't know, £1,000.
Oh no, you can put in anything. You can put in anything.
There you go.
There's a cap to how much you can put in within a tax year.
Okay, so there's a ceiling, but not a floor. But overall, the point is the government in the UK, just like with the stocks and shares individual savings account, as a way to encourage participation by regular folk in financing businesses. This is another way for even earlier in the financing stages of a business. Anybody can get involved, which isn't to say you should. It should be said. We are not your fiduciaries. Please do consult a financial advisor who, may have certain strong opinions about this. But when it's 25% at risk as opposed to 100%, let alone, even riskier, more idiotic things that people, especially regular folk, get sucked into, like currency trading on margin, anything on margin, really. This, I think, in that context is interesting, especially given that you've got more than 10 years of experience running another geospatial business, which is turning a very healthy profit, as I understand it, in terms of return on capital employed, in terms of free cash flow. So, okay, great. So that, I guess, as you said, to reach out to you directly for more details, and I hope some people might be interested in that. All right, so here goes. Anaximander arguably made the first world map 2,600 years ago. Would he be happy if you showed him Mapstack? How would you explain it to this ancient Greek?
I would explain it. First of all, I would say explain the new paradigm of mapping. So your maps were to navigate the world, okay? And that means physically navigating the world. How do I get from this island, this Greek island, to this other Greek island across the seas? Our maps might look very different to yours in 2022, but we're still using them to navigate the world. But now when we navigate the world, it doesn't necessarily mean a journey. I'm navigating the environment, the economy, the socioeconomics. So yeah, we're what you call it, as they love to say in Asia, same but different.
Sure. Okay, great. So continuing this idea, think of yourself as today's Anaximander. It is now 2,600 years into the future. Unfortunately, your work is now nothing more than a prehistoric curiosity. You may be referred to as a philosopher at best. What is the map stack of the day?
I wouldn't like to guess what the map stack of the day is, but I think what you would need to explain to somebody at that point in the future, you would say, back in the olden days where we were from, when you had a question, to arrive at the answer, you had to go through these things called intermediary steps. So we would have to do this and do this and do this in order to arrive at the answer. Whilst the world that you live in, it's probably powered by our AI overlords by then, is you just have the question and you're instantly given an answer. And you are completely oblivious that there may have been any steps or routines that were in the middle of that. So MapStack was trying to, one of our goals back in the olden days where I'm from, was to reduce the number of intermediary steps, because every extra step adds additional complexity. Every additional layer of complexity you add excludes a greater proportion of the people, of the population. So our goal was to try and remove as many intermediary steps as possible. We're not as sophisticated as you guys, so we couldn't remove them all, but we removed a couple of the bigger ones. That would be my
I love it. That's a call to action right there. So yeah, sign up for mapstack.io.